contribution to gross domestic product in sub-Saharan Africa. They are doing 30 or so percent. I mean, a sector that employs more than 85% contributing is minimal, it's low. So it tells you that there is a problem. So these are some of the things that I expect the president to touch on. And I think the youth touch and all those things fall under the umbrella of the SMEs, trying to build indigenous ownership. Look, you cannot create wealth without focusing on indigents. And this is one of the things that I've always said. If we focus on FDI, foreign direct investment, yes, people will bring in their monies. But then they will repatriate all this capital flight will go away. Sure. And that also puts excessive pressure. Emphasize more on the policies. And if you look at most of the policies that were captured in the 2023 budget statement, these are policies that are going to drive indigenous. A lot of people, especially the teeming unemployed Ghanaian youth, can actually maximize these policies.
Do you expect a very long address?
Obviously, I'm expecting something, the general standard that we've been treated to. I don't expect anything too short because this will obviously be his final. So I expect the president, he would have so much to say. So obviously, it's not a statement that I'm anticipating it to be so short. But then it is also going to be a statement that should be full of encouragement, full of hope for the Ghanaian youth.
So we're talking about the PAPs, and we're talking about our reserves.
Yes.
Now, one of the key policies this government introduced was the Gold for Oil initiative and also building gold reserves. We want to touch on these two policies,
yes,
how key that is to building our reserves.
Yes, it's true. So I talked about the fact that as at 2014, 2015, we had a reserve of less than 12 days import cover before the NDC government went to the IMF. By 2021, actually, by the close of 2021, as a result of some of these policies that you have touched on, we had built a reserve of about 9.9 billion USD, which is one of the highest since 1957 independence in Ghana. An import cover of equivalently about 4.8 months or 5 months import cover. So obviously, these policies that you are talking about has played a key role. But going forward, what are some of the things that we can do to even make sure that we have a more robust economy that can withstand exogenous shocks?
Right. So let's go back to Parliament. Augustus Akwe is our correspondent covering this particular event. Good morning to you, Augustus. Hello, Augustus. Can you hear me?
I can hear you,
Hello, Augustus. All right, so we'll still try and get that connection clear to Augustus Akwe, who is covering the SONA in Parliament for us. So we're talking about the Gold for Oil policy, and then we're trying to build gold reserves. As a country, we've been, mining gold for so many years, but we didn't have reserves as the UK would do, the developed economies, would do.
Yeah, so it comes back to the issue that I was talking about. I mean, I was born and bred in Obuasi. Now, in 2014, when the Obuasi mines was shut down, Obuasi became a ghost town. Why? Because there is no indigenous ownership of mines. The mine is owned by foreigners. So the mine, they employ the locals, they pay them some stipend or some fees, and then once they get the gold, they send it outside. In fact, at a point in time, it was even difficult to track the amount of gold that was actually leaving the shores of Ghana.
Sure.
So those are some of the issues that, going back into history, as a country, we have had to face. Now, going forward, what should be the way forward? That is what we saw this current government coming with a gold for oil policy. We saw that. We also saw them trying to buy gold. And this gold that they were trying to buy emerged from locals, Ghanaian indigenous mining, small mining firms that were producing this gold that the government was buying from to shore our reserves. And I think, yes, it is a good policy that we must all embrace and also urge the government to go on with. In fact, in terms of the gold for oil policy, if I read a report right, it told us that as at 2023, it had contributed to about 30 or more percent, I think 30-something percent of the oil that we consume within Ghana. So obviously, you cannot take it out in terms of the marginal stability of pricing that we witnessed, especially the last 1.5 years, as compared to the previous years, that once there is a slight increment, you could see oil price at the pump jumping to, let's say, about But I think at the point we went to about 27. Ghana cedis per letter.
Wife of the Speaker of Parliament and the husband of the Chief Justice all seated. And so the House is all ready, but it's rather unfortunate. The program, members of Parliament are supposed to be seated by 9:50 for proceedings to start at 10. But the members of the minority caucus are yet to take their seats. But I don't see them around, and we've already had this with the team of them. And so we don't understand why they are not in the chamber as a bill. But the assurance is that they will be seated before the proceedings begin in full. And so what we see to us, this State of the Nation address is of heightened interest. This is the penultimate one, the last one before the president makes the final State of the National address next year prior to the dissolution of the 8th Parliament. And so all eyes are on here. Last year, when the president meets the last time he came here was on the 8th of March, 2 days after the nation's Independence Day celebrations. And he set the ball rolling by making it clear that, he knew that the expectation of a lot of Ghanaians was on the prevailing economic conditions. We are expecting him to
Augustus, can you hear me?
Yeah, the interventions that he had said the government is going to pull out. And so being intended for it to build, then what the country is supposed to look forward to. Again, last week we saw the change in the leadership of the majority caucus. And so this is the first time the Honorable Alexander Martin, then for Winneba, is to lead the House to see the president.
Augustus, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Morris.
Yes, I'm saying reposition yourself so we hear you well. Your line is not too clear. If you can do that quickly, so
can you hear me
the conversation.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think it's better. So you were telling us about that shake-up at the majority side, the leadership.
Yes. Yes.
Has it had any impact on how that side of the house operates ever since the shake-up was done?
No, not at all. Not at all. Because even last week, Friday, after the introduction, should I say, formal introduction of the new majority and the delegates of the caucus was done in the House adjourned sitting. We saw members from the minority into the shake hands and hug Honorable Alexander Martin, and we all then just congratulate them. I mean, speaking to some prior to the formal communication was done, they felt it was a bit too unfortunate that the Venerable James had done excellently well, and we're expecting him to at least exit with the Parliament and just have a change hours before the dissolution of the House. And so, I mean, they felt it was unfortunate, but they believe in the the 50 years in Parliament and in the purposes, and they believe in the leadership of Alexander Martin. And so, even as unfortunate as it is, I mean, the House still goes on and wealth still goes on. And this morning, as the majority leader was walking in, I saw him walking with the MP and Tina Mesa, and they were in high spirits. They met in the opening of Parliament before they entered the chamber. They met Honorable Haruna Idrisu, Dr. Isaac, and some other MPs on purpose. They actually had a chance with them. Even as they came into the chamber, they have been having party conversations among themselves.
Right.
Like I said earlier, it's right on for the minority are not seated as of yet. But I mean, see all of them, see them around. And so I don't think the leadership is going to have any untoward effect on the proceedings in the chamber itself. The Honorable Alexander Martin, prior to being made the majority leader, was the deputy majority leader, and on several occasions has led proceedings in the chamber and has led the House in its sessions. So I should say it's been a rather smooth transition. Even when you look at last year, when the minority also made a similar change, I mean, the transition came to a stop, but it was very, very smooth. And so, yeah, that should be it.
Right. So, Augustus, I guess you've been speaking to some of the MPs. What exactly are they saying? What are their expectations of the address? We do not see the minority, but certainly they should be around Parliament. You've been speaking to them. What are their expectations?
So on the lighter note, a lot of them they are just hoping that presidents will not come and blame the Russians during the fortunes of the country. But on the more serious note, they feel that the president has made a lot of promises in the years. And even though it's a few months to the end of his tenure, he still has some time to redeem many of the promises. The one place one constraints allocate financial allocation to the members of Parliament for the development of the constraint. They are saying all these things seem lofty ideas, but the president has still made a redemption. And the members of the majority side also are very upbeat. They are saying the president has done looking at the economic solutions of the world right now. The president has been able to judiciously manage the economy. The government machinery comes to a fault of the public sector comes to a fault.
So, apart from the address today, are there any other major businesses to be carried out on the floor of Parliament? I hear some bills are to be passed today.
Yes, so the bill on the sexual rights and career Parliament bill, it has gone through all the considerations of
Augustus, I am losing you, so you still want to position yourself, so I hear you.
Pass the bill on the sexual rights and career values bill on Friday. They are done from the consideration stages, and so the leadership, the leadership proposed that they bring it to today. That there's people didn't make any solution to it. When they realize that they will be the day the president will be seeing the president or setting off but time and time again, when the president is done with his State of the Nation address, it's supposed to be the House pertains to the rights of our terms after the presentation, especially because, I mean, members of parliament are going to have to digest this. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so Augustus Akwe, we want to thank you. Augustus Akwe is our correspondent in Parliament, monitoring the event. So we still have Dr. Frank Bano in the studio. He's an economist. I'm here discussing some of the expectations in the address. So we'll try and wrap up on the economy. So as we all know, we're doing an IMF program. There's a conversation between government and the international bondholders, which would inform moving forward whether the IMF will give us our next tranche of the bailout. Do you have any updates?
Yeah, I think if my memory serves me right, the last time I inquired about that conversation, I was told that the bondholders, external bondholders, majority of them are countries. You look at China, it's one of the countries that Ghana is highly indebted to. They had given their word the signal that they were going to actually sit on the table and more or less agree to the restructuring in terms of the debt payment. And I think that was one of the things that the government is supposed to achieve to trigger the 600 million USD. So hopefully, yes, I am hopeful that they would come to the sitting table and agree, because the point here being is that let's even say we are going to the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is that the country might not be in the position to make payment at this point. So if the country is willing to give alternative terms, which it intends to pay the debt payment, but however, in a different terms, then I think the only thing good to do is to sit down and negotiate and maybe come to a favorable terms that will suit the payment of debt. And Ghana is not the only country in this situation. A country like Zambia already finds itself in a similar situation. You talk about Tanzania, you talk about Morocco has been to the IMF, Egypt has been to the IMF, Tunisia has found itself there, Ethiopia has found itself there already. So there are a lot of so-called economic giants within the sub-region that find themselves in similar situation. And this situation has not been as a result of quote-unquote bad economic management, but because of the pass-through effects that I spoke about. If you talk about a country like Kenya, for example, not long ago last year, we saw that there was even fuel shortage in Kenya. We saw people going into the streets, but that was immediately when a new government, President Ruto's government, has assumed power. You talk about the country like South Africa, for example. So you see, so all these are the pass-through effects and how economies are structured. Its dependence and reliance and exposure to advanced economies, to investment from advanced economies. And all these economies that I've talked about rely a lot on Western economies, if you look at the data and if you look at the trend so far. So these are some of the things that has accumulated into some of these issues that we find ourselves as a nation. And that is the main reason why I have emphasized, and I'll continue to re-emphasize, that as a country, we need to prioritize indigenous businesses and ownership. That was one of the things that the Singaporeans did, okay? The Malaysians did a similar thing. No country, look, if you don't grow your own millionaires, you will be always found wanting. If you have your own millionaires, okay, in terms of the supply chain, for example, if in Ghana we had a very serious and strong supply chain, for example, you wouldn't see the escalation of prices that we saw at that moment. For example, if you go to South Africa, you have the Pick and Pays, you have the Checkers, you have the games, okay? So these big companies, more or less a retail company, give seedlings, give funds to farmers, for example. So once these farmers farm, they go for the produce directly onto their shelves and they sell. So though you could see fuel prices increasing, however, you don't actually experience the food inflation that we saw in Ghana. And in Ghana now, food inflation, transport inflation, and of course, what I call rent inflation or accommodation inflation has become the major determinants or drivers of inflation in our country. And these are all intertwined. So in addition to what I expect from the president today, how what are the policies or the measures that the president is going to ensure or is going to enforce to ensure that something like rent inflation? I know that there's the rent assistance that has already been rolled out, and the last time I checked, it had given rent assistance to over 1,300 Ghanaians. I know, but that is not enough. We know
it doesn't really deal with the inflation. I mean, you go for the money, you still go and pay the same amount.
The same amount of money. So
it's not as if rent is coming down.
Yes. So the underlying factors. So I have seen the State Housing Corporation go into massive building of accommodation. Then the question also comes in: who are the target market of these houses that are being built? Are these houses being built so that the same people who have the means will go and hijack? By hijacking simply means they go and buy these houses and they rent it out to you and I at exorbitant rent. That is some of the underlying factors that I think the president really, I've seen that he has changed his minister for works and housing. Maybe the new minister coming in also has his own ideas that he's going to roll out to ensure that rent, especially in Accra and Kumasi, Takoradi and Tamale, these major cities, actually comes down a bit, and for that matter, we beaten inflation. And the food is very, very critical, the food inflation, as I talked about. So if under the USTAT, if under the PC2, I mean the Planting for Foods and Job 2, if really we can really enhance and enforce some of these policies to ensure that, yes, food really becomes cheaper than what we experience it, and not to take anything away. Look, if anyone tells you that the Planting for Food and Jobs hasn't had any impact, the person is trying to play politics here. It has an enormous impact. In fact, I have watched videos of people talking about maize pricing, for example, that some form of stability has been achieved over the years that we had not seen before in terms of maize pricing. So obviously it has had an impact, but then the impact should be drastic. It should be impact that actually people feel it within the impact. So these are some of the things that I expect the president to touch on today.
Talking about changes to government, the ministerial reshuffle. So we saw Ken Ofori-Atta replaced by Dr. Amin Adam. And now Ken is going to be a special envoy, an advisor in terms of capital markets, fundraising and what have you. Do you think this change came rather too late?
I think the change could have happened earlier. For me, that's my personal own view. I think at a point that their own side, the majority, or let me say, a significant number of the majority, including the outgone majority leader, when they said they wanted Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta to step down, I think for the sake of optics, the president should have listened to that plea. Because in politics, optics count a lot. I am not really a believer of optics. I believe in actually solving the structural underlying problems. But then in African politics, people rely a lot on optics than solving the structural or underlying problems. So if indeed the president was going to undertake a reshuffling in 2024 that will see Mr. Ofori-Atta exit, then I think that was when, was it 2023? Then I'm sure in 2023, for the sake of the optics, then Mr. Ofori-Atta should have maybe given way for whoever that at that point could have replaced him. In my personal view, that's what I think. But then it is also not too late because certainly Mr. Ofori-Atta is one of the key individuals who had led this IMF negotiation. And I quite remember very well that the president himself, during that time that a significant number of the majority raised the issue of Ken Ofori-Atta, he himself said that they should allow Mr. Ofori-Atta to finish with the IMF program or negotiations, right? Then he can make way for another person to come in. So I am also inclined to think that maybe the president said that, and then based on his word, Mr. Ofori-Atta maybe has achieved a significant part of the negotiation, and for that matter, this will be the right time for him to also step aside for a new person to come. So it's a two-side story.
But this whole reshuffle was really championed by the MPP, the top executives of the MPP, the national organizer, the secretary. They were pushing for a reshuffle. So really, the reason for this particular reshuffle was that push from the party.
Obviously, I mean, you can't rule anything away from the fact that 2024 is an election year. And remember, I have spoken about the optics. The Ghanaian populace or the Ghanaian voter believe in these optics that we are talking about. Believes in that, look, you should show me some signal that you are willing to change something. And I think that might be one of the reasons why maybe you talked about the party hierarchy, maybe pushing, because they know that 2024 is an election year. You have a new flag bearer Okay, you have the Vice President, His Excellency, Dr. Mahmoud Maubia, who has been elected as the flag bearer of the NPP. So in all, what optics, what are you showing? What signals are you giving to the Ghanaian voter to show that, look, we have a new leadership, and for that matter, we should have a change in the normal trajectory of doing things. I think that is one of the things that maybe we might have witnessed with this reshuffling that we saw recently, not long ago. But then in terms of impact, yes, I mean, for me, I think that it will have an impact. I mean, one of the things that the market does, look, not long ago when the Queen fell sick, or it was speculated that the Queen fell sick, the market picked it.
I mean, it happens mostly in the developed economies.
But it's also sent signals to people.
In Ghana, our markets don't really respond to some of this.
Maybe the external market, for example, maybe in terms of FDI attraction. Okay, maybe in terms of FDI attraction, it sends some kind of signals, right? It sends some kind of signals to your trade partners. Maybe people who were not willing to come and invest because of one or other reasons. Maybe it will send some signal to the look, there has been changes. So please, if you were thinking of moving away from Ghana, please come back. So definitely in terms of the signals, our markets, like you've rightly said, because our financial system has, I mean, let's also not take the credit away that digitalization has really done much in terms of integrating our financial sector. I mean, back in the days that every single transaction had to be gone through the bank. So we can also roll that out. In fact, I remember the first time that I was going to buy my tertiary application form. When I went to the institution, I was told to go to GCB then and go and do a bank draft.
Sure.
And the bank draft took almost 2 hours for me to get it before I came back. And on my way back, it rained heavily here in Accra, and the rain really beat me. I will never forget that day. So if we had digitalization then, I don't think I would have gone through this process, okay? It would just be a matter of me just taking my phone, going through an app, and then issuing that payment to the university system. So not to take that away, digitalization has really integrated and really ensured that there is financial inclusion in the Ghanaian economy.
About how the markets respond
exactly
to changes.
Yes.
So recently, if you remember, Dr. Bawumia announced his manifesto team, and then there was one Miss Abena Amoah who was supposed to be a co-chair on the finance committee of the manifesto committee. And then there were some who thought that this Miss Abena Amoah was the MD of the Ghana Stock Exchange because her name is Miss Abena Amoah. So they were like, why are you part of the But that didn't really change anything. But in developed countries, just a slight information such as these could have triggered some change in the Ghana Stock Exchange.
Exactly. So then we come to the issue of asymmetry of information. I mean, here, like I said, because over the years, we are not really used to an integrated, inclusive financial system. So we had a loose, segregated financial system, right? So even over the years, we didn't even really lay credence to what policy could do to our interest rate, for example. Sure. I mean, when I talk about the interest rate, I'm not looking at the lending rate, but I'm looking at the interest that you earn on your money when you go to make a deposit in the bank, for example. You know that is indirectly affected by the policy rate that the central bank comes out with. Sure. But for some years back, let's say about 10 years ago, no one even cared about this, or no one even paid much attention that the policy rate could actually affect whether I was doing well or not. So there was a point in time when the policy rate actually came to about 13.5% under the MPP government. And when you spoke about it, someone would tell you that, how does that translate into my pocket? Forgetting that if interest rate is high, like we saw inflation galloping, and for that matter, the central bank needed to tighten its policy rate, and for that matter, it increased it to about 30%, and it actually affected borrowing, for example. And a lot of people were crying that borrowing has become expensive. So that is how policy in turn affects it, and that is how the market also picks up. Because borrowing has become very expensive. Even if you have a friend who could give you money, let's say 100,000 Ghana cedis, and say, okay, when you return it, just give me 5,000 Ghana cedis. Your friend will now tell that, no, if you are returning 100,000 Ghana cedis, you should give me a 10,000 Ghana cedis. Because your friend has picked that information that we are talking about here, that in the market, if you are supposed to go in there, maybe you might be paying more than what we are seeing here. Right. So obviously, indirectly, the markets will pick it, but it is not as strict as advanced economies which are financially integrated.
So what do you also make of the fact that Ken Ofori-Atta will now be the advisor when it comes to capital markets? So he's been reshuffled, but he's still in the picture.
Yeah. So for me, I wish I could see the terms of reference of that engagement. I have chanced upon the letter from the office of the president appointing him to that role, that he will be a financial advisor, and I think it's dual, right? And then investment as well. Also see to that there is that investment drive into the Ghanaian. I mean, obviously, Ken Ofori-Atta, as an individual, I mean, politics aside, I'm just trying to depoliticize him and try to do a very objective analysis here. If you move him away from politics, I mean, he has been a fantastic investor. He has been an investment banker. You can't take it away. I mean, you look at his, you look at Enterprise data bank, and so on and so forth. I mean, Enterprise is one of the strongest companies that you can talk about in Ghana today. So he is a fantastic person in terms of what he does, right? If you are also trying to bring in a bit of politics, and I talk out here now the party he belongs to, I mean, his role as finance minister. I mean, I read the data to you. If you look at under his leadership, Ghana has one of the highest reserves, that is 9.9 billion, which was one of the highest since 1957, not just under the Fourth Republic, but since 1950, and this was under Ken Ofori-Atta's leadership. We also had one of the lowest inflation rate, which is about 7.6 or so % in 2019, if I'm right. That was also under him being the finance minister, because the central bank is under the Ministry of Finance, obviously. So you can chalk that as part of his successes. Until COVID-19 came, that was when we started having these challenges. And that was when people now started to see him in a different light. So definitely, you cannot really say he's a bad person, or he, in terms of he executing his role as a financial advisor or investor, he is a bad one. No, he's one of the best you can talk of in Ghana
but
today.
Some criticize him for overborrowing. So almost every year we're doing Eurobond. In fact, in 2022, we're actually going to go back to the Eurobond.
Exactly, until we got banned.
Until we're locked out. So consistently had borrowed every year.
In fact, Ken Ofori-Atta is no exception from Honorable Sektepe. Okay. If you look at the data, in 2013, the NDC government went to the Eurobond market. In fact, let me just read